My girlfriend treated me terribly at dinner with her parents, called me a loser who's afraid she'll leave him, said she won't live like this, then ran away with another man only to come back and find prison waiting for her. Hey Reddit, I'm Tyler, 28 years old, and until 3 weeks ago I thought I had my life completely figured out. I'd been with my fiancée Ashley for 5 years total. She's 25, and we got engaged 9 months ago after what felt like the most natural progression in the world. We'd been living together for almost 3 years at that point, and honestly, I genuinely believed we were that couple that was actually going to make it. You know the type. The ones who seem to have their relationships sorted out while everyone else around them is dealing with constant drama. Let me give you some background on our situation. I work in digital marketing and make decent money, which has allowed me to maintain a pretty stable life overall. Ashley works in graphic design, but her company started struggling about a year ago. Her hours and pay got cut pretty badly, which meant I'd been covering most of our expenses since then. To be completely honest, it wasn't a big deal at the time because when you're planning to marry someone, you figure that's just how relationships work sometimes. One person carries more weight when the other is going through rough patches, and I was happy to be in a position where I could support us both. About 3 weeks ago, Ashley came home from work with this energy that I hadn't seen in months. She was genuinely excited about something, practically bouncing around the kitchen while I was making dinner. The thing is, she'd been acting weird for maybe a week before this moment. Constantly on her phone, laughing at messages she wouldn't show me. That whole suspicious routine that makes your stomach drop even when you're trying not to be paranoid. I'd been telling myself it was probably work stress, or maybe she was planning something special for my birthday next month. But no, it wasn't any of those things. Turns out she was excited about Derek, her ex-boyfriend. And before you start wondering, yeah, I knew all about Derek. It's pretty hard not to know about someone when your girlfriend dated them for 3 years right before she started dating you. This guy is everything you'd expect from someone who still haunts their ex's social media. Tall, good-looking, drives a Mercedes, and works at some investment firm. He's basically one of those guys who probably peaked in college but still acts like he's hot shit because he can afford bottle service at trendy clubs. So apparently Derek's company runs these big sales competitions every quarter, and this particular time, the grand prize was a 6-day trip to the Bahamas. We're talking all expenses paid at some resort that probably costs more per night than I make in a week. It was a real nice setup too. Oceanfront suite, unlimited everything. The kind of romantic getaway that people save up for years to afford. Here's where the story gets interesting. Derek had won the contest, but his girlfriend Brittany had dumped him about a month before the trip. So now he's sitting there with this incredibly expensive romantic getaway for two and nobody to take with him. And guess who was the very first person he thought to invite? That's right, my fiancée. Ashley told me about this entire situation, like she was announcing what we were having for dinner that night. Just completely casual, like it was the most normal thing in the world for someone's ex-boyfriend to invite them on a romantic vacation. She was going through Derek's messages on her phone, showing me pictures of the resort, talking enthusiastically about how the weather was supposed to be absolutely perfect that week. The whole time I'm standing there with a spatula in my hand, stirring whatever I was cooking, thinking to myself, is this actually happening right now? When I asked her if she was seriously considering going on a romantic vacation with her ex-boyfriend, she looked at me like I had just asked her if the sky was blue. Of course she was considering it. It was a completely free trip to the Bahamas. Why wouldn't she want to go? From her perspective, this was obviously a no-brainer opportunity that any reasonable person would jump at. I tried explaining to her that most people in committed relationships would see a pretty obvious problem with their engaged partner going away with an ex for 6 days. I told her that this wasn't really about trust. It was about respect and basic boundaries. There's a fundamental difference between being controlling and having normal expectations in a relationship, and this situation clearly fell into the category of normal expectations. But Ashley hit me with every single classic line in the book. I was being insecure. I was being controlling. Derek was just being nice by offering her a free vacation, and they were completely over each other anyway. Had been for years. What was the big deal? She even threw in some pointed comments about how I should trust her more, and how truly healthy relationships don't involve policing your partner's friendships and social interactions. The thing is, I genuinely did trust Ashley, or at least I thought I did. But this whole situation wasn't actually about trust at all. It was about judgment. What kind of person thinks it's appropriate to go on what is essentially a couple's vacation with their ex-boyfriend when they're engaged to someone else? What kind of person doesn't immediately understand why their partner would be uncomfortable with that arrangement? These seemed like pretty basic relationship common sense to me. The conversation went downhill pretty fast after that point. She got defensive first, then annoyed, then straight up angry that I wasn't being supportive of her getting what she saw as a fantastic free vacation opportunity. I managed to stay calm through most of the argument because that's just how I handle conflict. But inside, I was absolutely losing my mind. We're supposed to be planning a wedding together, building a future, and she wants to go play house with her ex-boyfriend in the Caribbean, like we're not even together. By the end of the night, we weren't really talking to each other anymore. She'd made it pretty clear that she was going to do whatever she wanted, regardless of how I felt about the situation. I went to bed that night thinking the conversation wasn't over, that maybe she'd sleep on it and realize how messed up this whole situation really was. I mean, we were engaged. That had to count for something, right? I was so incredibly wrong about that. The next day was Thursday, and we had my parents' 25th anniversary dinner planned. A big family celebration that my mom had been organizing for months. I figured that maybe being around family would put things in perspective for Ashley, remind her that we were supposed to be building something together as a couple. Instead, she used it as an opportunity to publicly humiliate me in front of everyone I care about. My entire family was coming to this dinner. Obviously, my parents were there, along with my older sister Katie and her husband Dave. My younger brother Matt had driven down from Orlando specifically for this celebration. Even my 76-year-old grandma had made the trip from Fort Lauderdale, which was a big deal since she doesn't travel much anymore. This was supposed to be one of those nice family memories you look back on fondly years later. A celebration of love and commitment. Ashley seemed completely off from the moment we walked into my parents' house. Usually, she's actually pretty good with my family. She knows how to work a room, makes engaging conversation, and typically helps my mom in the kitchen without being asked. But that night, she was unusually quiet during the pre-dinner drinks, barely touched the appetizers my mom had spent all afternoon preparing, and kept checking her phone under the table like she was waiting for something important. I should have recognized that she had this look on her face like she was planning something, but I was too focused on trying to enjoy the evening with my family to really pay attention to her weird behavior. My dad was telling his usual stories about when he and mom first got married. Grandma was playfully roasting everyone like she always does at family gatherings, and Matt was showing us pictures from his new job. It was completely normal, pleasant family conversation. Exactly what you'd expect at an anniversary celebration. About halfway through dinner, my mom started asking about our future plans, which is pretty standard territory for family gatherings. When are you two getting married? Where's the wedding going to be? Do you want kids? All the typical questions that parents ask when their children are engaged. Usually, I deflect these questions with jokes, or we give vague answers about still being in the planning stages. It's never been a big deal, just parents being parents and showing interest in our lives. But this time, instead of our usual routine, Ashley put down her fork and let out this really loud sigh. I'm talking loud enough that everyone at the table stopped talking and turned to look at her. Then she started going off about toxic masculinity and controlling behavior in relationships. She said this while casually cutting her roast beef, like she was discussing the weather or commenting on how nice the flowers looked. Why do some men always think they can dictate what their girlfriends do? She said, acting completely nonchalant. It's like they believe that having a relationship means owning someone. It's so exhausting dealing with guys who get threatened by the most basic social interactions. She kept going while the entire table sat in absolutely stunned silence. It's honestly pathetic how insecure some men get when their partner has any kind of independence. Like, healthy relationships require trust, not constant paranoia about every friendship. The whole time she was saying this, she was acting completely casual, even smiling at me across the table a couple of times, like she thought she was making some brilliant point that I desperately needed to hear. The entire table went dead silent. My dad stopped chewing mid-bite and just stared at her with his fork halfway to his mouth. My grandma looked confused as hell, probably trying to figure out what any of this had to do with anniversary dinners and family celebrations. Katie's eyes went wide like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Even Dave, who's usually pretty quiet at family gatherings, put down his fork and was just watching this whole scene unfold like it was a car accident. My mom tried to salvage the situation by asking if everything was okay with us. But Ashley just said she was speaking generally about relationship dynamics. Speaking generally about toxic men and controlling behavior at my parents' 25th anniversary dinner while looking directly at me the entire time. The rest of dinner was probably the most awkward hour of my entire life. Nobody knew what to say or how to respond to what had just happened. My mom kept desperately trying to change the subject back to normal family topics, but the damage was already done. The comfortable, celebratory atmosphere had been completely destroyed. Matt kept glancing back and forth between me and Ashley like he was watching a slow-motion car accident happen right in front of him. Even my dad, who's usually pretty good at diffusing tension and getting conversations back on track, seemed completely lost and didn't know how to handle what Ashley had just done. When dessert came out, Ashley suddenly got all chatty again, like absolutely nothing had happened. She started asking my grandma about her garden, complimenting my mom enthusiastically on the meal, and making small talk like she hadn't just spent 10 minutes publicly humiliating me for having what most people would consider basic relationship boundaries. The whiplash was incredible. One minute she's giving a lecture about toxic masculinity, and the next she's acting like the perfect girlfriend again. The drive home was painfully quiet, the kind of silence that makes your own thoughts feel loud enough to shatter the windows. I swear I must have looked at her reflection in the side mirror 50 times, waiting for her to just say something, anything, to acknowledge what had just happened. But no, she just stared out the window like she was in some indie film montage about heartbreak, except I was the only one who seemed confused about what was going on. When we finally pulled into our apartment complex, she just grabbed her purse and walked ahead of me like she hadn't just set my entire family's opinion of our relationship on fire over mashed potatoes and anniversary cake. I followed her up the stairs, unlocked the door, and we did this incredibly awkward dance around each other in the kitchen. I watched her put her leftovers in the fridge like that was the most pressing issue we needed to deal with at that moment. I couldn't take the tension anymore, so I just came out with it. What was that dinner speech supposed to accomplish? My voice probably cracked a little, but I didn't care at that point. I needed answers. She didn't even turn around to look at me. She just shrugged and opened the fridge again, like the answer was somewhere in there next to the ketchup. Nothing. I was just making conversation, you know? Making conversation. Right. Like telling my mom and dad and my sister that I don't let her breathe without permission is normal small talk. Totally casual, like, hey guys, pass the salt. Oh, by the way, your son's basically a dictator in sweatpants. So I called her on it. I told her straight up that it sounded like she was trying to talk about Derek and the Bahamas situation without having the guts to actually say Derek's name out loud. She spun around and rolled her eyes at me like I had just asked her why the sky is blue. You're being paranoid, she snapped. Not everything's about you. Not everything's about me. So why did her whole speech sound like it was exactly about me and our conversation from 2 days ago? She can't just blast me with passive-aggressive commentary at my family dinner and then pretend she's hosting some moral talk show about strong women and weak men. I told her the timing was a little too perfect to be a coincidence. She acted like she didn't even remember that I had told her just 2 days ago that I wasn't okay with her taking a Bahamas trip with Derek. She huffed and mumbled something about me needing to get over my insecurities, which was particularly rich coming from the same person who reads my phone over my shoulder when I text my female coworker about actual work-related topics. We just stood there for what felt like forever. Her arms crossed, leaning against the counter like she owned the place, and me trying to figure out how someone can look you dead in the eye and tell you you're crazy when you know exactly what you heard. And the worst part? She didn't apologize. Didn't even try to spin it nicely or make some excuse. She just stood there waiting for me to drop the subject like I always do. Looking back now, I think she was trying to make me the bad guy before doing something she knew was wrong. Like if she could paint me as controlling and insecure in front of my family, then whatever she did next would somehow be justified. It's a classic manipulation move. Make your partner look unreasonable so your unreasonable behavior seems normal by comparison. But here's what really gets me about that whole situation. I actually started doubting myself that night. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I found myself wondering if maybe I was being controlling. Maybe I was being insecure. Maybe normal, healthy couples would be totally fine with their partners going on romantic vacations with their exes, and I was just some paranoid boyfriend who couldn't handle his girlfriend having male friends. That's how good she was at this manipulation. She had me questioning my own sanity over what should have been basic relationship boundaries. I went to sleep that night thinking the whole dinner disaster had put things in perspective for her. After embarrassing both of us like that, and seeing how uncomfortable she'd made my entire family, surely she'd realize that the Bahamas trip was a terrible idea. We went to bed without talking about Derek again, but I figured that after what happened at dinner, there was no way she'd actually go through with it. I mean, She'd just seen firsthand how her behavior was affecting not just me, but people who cared about both of us. Man, was I wrong about that too? Friday morning, I woke up around 7 a.m. to an empty bed. At first, I figured Ashley had just gotten up early for work or maybe had gone for a run. She'd been doing this weird early morning workout routine lately, so an empty bed wasn't immediately suspicious or anything that set off alarm bells. But something felt off about the whole apartment. There was this strange quiet that felt different from her just being in another room. I got up to make coffee, and that's when I noticed her side of the closet looked different. Not completely empty, but definitely missing stuff. It was like when someone packs for a trip but tries to make it look like they didn't take much so you won't notice. Her favorite dresses were gone, along with the good makeup bag and her fancy sandals. The bathroom had the same suspicious vibe, missing just enough toiletries to cover a long weekend, but not obvious enough to notice unless you really looked for it. That's when it hit me like a punch to the gut. The flight to the Bahamas was scheduled for this morning. I checked my phone frantically, thinking maybe she'd left a note or sent a message explaining what was happening. Nothing. No text, no missed calls, no sticky note on the fridge. She had just vanished into thin air like our entire relationship meant nothing. Around 11:30 a.m., my phone finally buzzed with a message from her. "Just landed in Nassau! Weather's perfect already!" With a picture attached. It was a selfie of her and Derek at what looked like the airport terminal, both wearing sunglasses and grinning like complete idiots on vacation. Derek had his arm casually draped around her shoulders, and she was leaning into him like they were already a couple again. I stared at that message for probably 10 straight minutes, my brain completely unable to process what I was seeing. She'd actually done it. After everything we'd talked about, after that complete disaster at my parents' dinner, after 5 years together and 9 months of being engaged, she'd snuck out at dawn and flown to the Caribbean with her ex-boyfriend. No conversation, no heads up, no consideration whatsoever for how I might feel about waking up to find my fiancé gone. Just a cheery little vacation update like she was texting me from the grocery store. My hands were legitimately shaking when I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Her phone was probably on airplane mode or turned off completely to avoid dealing with any consequences. I tried 3 more times over the next hour. Same thing every time. Just that generic voicemail message. No explanation, no acknowledgement of what she'd just done. The Instagram stories started almost immediately. By noon, she was posting gorgeous sunset shots from their resort balcony, fancy cocktails by an infinity pool, and photos of her and Derek at some beachside restaurant that probably cost more for lunch than most people spend on groceries in a week. In every single picture where Derek appeared, they looked way too comfortable together for people who were supposedly just friends. His hand on her back, her laughing at something he said. Both of them looking tanned and relaxed like they'd been together for years, rather than like she was engaged to someone else. I called in sick to work because there was absolutely no way I could concentrate on anything. I spent most of Friday just sitting in our apartment, refreshing her social media like some kind of masochist, and trying to wrap my head around what was happening to my life. Every new post felt like another punch in the gut. Here's us at the beach. Here's our amazing dinner. Here's Derek being so funny and charming. It was like watching my relationship dissolve in real time through carefully curated vacation photos. By Friday afternoon, I was going through this weird mix of emotions that I'd never experienced before. Part of me was angry, like genuinely furious that she'd just bail on our entire relationship for a vacation with her ex-boyfriend. Part of me was deeply hurt because this was supposed to be the woman I was going to marry, and she'd chosen some other guy over me without even having the courtesy of a real conversation about it. But there was also this cold, analytical part of my brain that was starting to see the situation with absolute clarity. This wasn't some impulsive decision or miscommunication on her part. She had planned this whole thing out deliberately. She'd probably booked the flight days ago and had just been waiting for the right moment to execute her plan. The family dinner speech about toxic men wasn't some random outburst. It was her setting up justification for what she was about to do. She'd packed her bags carefully, set her alarm, and snuck out before I woke up because she knew exactly how messed up what she was doing really was. The woman I was supposed to marry had just chosen her ex-boyfriend over me and didn't even have the guts to tell me to my face. That realization hit me harder than the betrayal itself. Friday evening around 6:30 p.m., my phone finally rang with Ashley's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. I needed to hear what possible explanation she could have for this situation. "Look, I know you're upset, but this isn't what you think," she said, like she was explaining why she'd come home late from work. Derek and I are just friends. This is just a vacation. Just a vacation, with her ex-boyfriend in a couple's suite, while we were engaged. Is that what you're telling yourself? I asked. Don't be like this. You're being paranoid again. We're not doing anything wrong. I hung up on her. She called back twice, but I let it go to voicemail. Whatever she had to say, I wasn't interested in hearing more lies and manipulation. Friday evening, I started doing something I probably should have done months ago. Really looking at our relationship with completely clear eyes. All the times she'd dismissed my concerns about various situations made me feel crazy for having normal expectations, prioritized other people's feelings over mine. The way she'd handled conflict by making me feel like I was being unreasonable instead of actually addressing the problem. Like 7 months ago, when her coworker Jake kept texting her late at night about non-work stuff, and I mentioned that it made me uncomfortable. Instead of setting appropriate boundaries with Jake, she told me I was being insecure and possessive. Or when she'd make plans with friends without checking if we had anything going on together, then get annoyed when I pointed out that we'd already talked about doing something that same night. I'd been making excuses for her behavior for years, telling myself she was just independent or strong-willed. But really, she was just selfish. She did whatever she wanted and expected me to be okay with it because I loved her. The Bahamas thing wasn't some random anomaly. It was the natural progression of how she'd been treating our relationship all along. Saturday morning, I woke up to more Instagram stories. Her and Derek doing some couples massage thing at the resort spa, both of them in matching robes looking relaxed and happy. The caption was something about treating yourself to the good life with a bunch of heart emojis. That's when I realized she wasn't just disrespecting our relationship. She was actively flaunting it. She was posting this content publicly where all our friends and her family could see it, making it completely obvious to everyone that she was on a romantic vacation with another man while engaged to me. She wanted people to see this. She wanted me to see this. Maybe she thought it would make me jealous enough to fight for her. Or maybe she just didn't give a shit about how it looked. Either way, it showed me exactly how much she respected me and our relationship, which was not at all. Saturday afternoon, I made a decision that probably saved my sanity and definitely saved my future. Instead of sitting around waiting for her to come back so we could have some big dramatic conversation about what this meant for our relationship, I decided to take decisive action. If Ashley wanted to act like she was single, I was going to help her out with that. But first, I needed to figure out exactly what I was dealing with financially and legally, because something told me this situation was about to get a lot more complicated than just having a cheating fiancé. The next day, I'm sitting in my apartment when my phone rings around 9:30 a.m. It's Linda from my company's finance department, which was immediately weird because I've maybe talked to her twice in the 3 years I've worked there. You don't get random calls from finance unless something is seriously wrong. Hey Tyler, sorry to bother you, but we're doing our quarterly audit of corporate credit card expenses, and I have some questions about charges on your account, she said. At first, I figured it was just routine stuff. Maybe some receipt was missing or a client dinner looked suspicious in the system. But Linda's tone was off, like she was trying to be professional, but something was really bothering her. Can you walk me through some of these business meal charges from the past few months? Some of them seem unusual, she continued. That's when my stomach completely dropped. About a year ago, when Ashley's job situation got shaky and money was tight, I'd added her as an authorized user on my corporate credit card. It was supposed to be for emergencies only, maybe the occasional lunch if she was meeting with potential clients for her freelance design work. I figured it would help her network and maybe land some projects while her company figured their situation out. Apparently, that was a massive mistake. Linda started reading off charges from the past 4 months. $3,600 total. Spa treatments at places I'd never heard of. Expensive dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford on my own salary. Shopping trips to boutiques that definitely weren't serving business clients. All of it had been marked in the system as client meetings or business development expenses. The worst part was that half of these charges lined up perfectly with Ashley's Instagram posts from the past few months. That fancy brunch place she'd posted about with her girlfriends last month? Charged to my company as a client meeting. The day spa where she got those expensive treatments for her birthday? Listed as a business expense? Those designer shoes she'd been showing off on social media? Apparently a necessary purchase for client relations. Linda was being professional about the whole thing, but I could tell she was basically asking if I'd been using company money for personal expenses. Which, technically, I had, just not knowingly. She explained that the finance team had flagged my account because the spending pattern didn't match my usual business activities. and some of the vendor categories were way outside what would be considered normal business expenses. "The company requires us to investigate any unusual spending patterns," she said carefully. "Can you provide receipts and documentation for these charges showing they were legitimate business expenses?" I told her I'd need to check my records and get back to her, but inside, I was absolutely freaking out. Not only had my fiancé just ditched me for her ex-boyfriend, but she'd been systematically stealing from my employer for months, and I was the one who was going to get fired if I couldn't prove these were legitimate business expenses. After I hung up with Linda, I went through all my emails looking for any communication with Ashley about these charges. I found a few text messages where she'd mentioned grabbing lunch with potential clients or attending networking events, but nothing that would actually hold up to real scrutiny. No business cards exchanged, no follow-up meetings scheduled, no contracts signed, no actual business conducted. Just expensive meals and shopping trips disguised as work expenses. The more I dug into it, the clearer it became that Ashley had been straight up lying to me about what these charges were for. That $320 spa day wasn't networking with a potential client. It was her monthly girls' day with her sister and friends. That $180 dinner at the steakhouse wasn't a business meeting. It was her birthday celebration that I'd somehow missed paying for directly. She'd been living off my company's money while telling me she was trying to drum up business for herself. And the worst part was how casual she'd been about it, like using someone else's corporate credit card for personal expenses was just a normal thing that people did without consequences. I called Linda back and told her I needed to report potential unauthorized use of the company card. She immediately connected me with the legal department, who scheduled a meeting for Tuesday morning. They also sent me a comprehensive packet of forms to fill out for filing a police report, because apparently, corporate credit card fraud is a pretty serious crime when you're talking about amounts over $1,000. Spending the weekend knowing I was about to turn in my own fiancé for fraud was absolutely surreal. Part of me felt guilty, like maybe I should give her a chance to explain herself or offer to pay the money back personally. But then I'd refresh Instagram and see another photo of her and Derek looking like they were on their honeymoon, and I'd remember that she was currently on vacation with another man while I dealt with the legal consequences of her stealing from my employer. Saturday afternoon, I called my buddy Connor, who owns a moving company. Connor and I went to college together, and he's one of those reliable guys who's always down to help out when life hits the fan. I told him I needed a favor and would pay whatever it took for weekend service. "What's the situation?" he asked, probably expecting something routine. "I need to move fast, like everything packed and out by Monday," I explained. Connor didn't ask too many questions, which I really appreciated. He just told me he could have a truck and 2 guys available Sunday morning, and we'd figure out the details later. Here's the thing about our living situation that I'd never really thought about strategically before. The apartment lease was signed by both of us, but I'd been paying 100% of the rent since Ashley's hours got cut months ago. Same with utilities, internet, groceries, basically everything. On paper, we were equal tenants, but in reality, she'd been completely financially dependent on me for almost a year. This gave me an idea for how to handle the situation. Instead of trying to kick her out or getting into some messy fight over who gets to stay in the apartment, I was going to leave her with the whole mess to deal with on her own. She wanted to make adult decisions without consulting me? Perfect. She could handle adult responsibilities without my help. Saturday evening, I started going through the apartment methodically and figuring out what actually belonged to whom. It turns out that most of our stuff was actually mine from before we moved in together. The TV, the couch, the bed, all the kitchen appliances, even most of the furniture. Ashley had moved in with basically just clothes and some decorative items. My plan was beautifully simple. Pack up everything that was mine, move it to a new place, and leave Ashley to figure out how to afford an empty apartment on her graphic design salary. No drama, no big confrontation, no emotional manipulation. Just the natural consequences of her choices. Sunday morning, I found a furnished month-to-month place across town. Nothing fancy, but it was available immediately, and I could afford the deposit without touching any joint accounts. I signed the lease, got the keys, and was ready to execute my plan. By Sunday afternoon, I was feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Actual control over my situation. Instead of sitting around waiting for Ashley to come back so we could have some tearful conversation about what her vacation meant for our relationship, I was taking decisive action. She wanted to act like she was single? Perfect. I was about to help her with that in ways she wasn't expecting. Sunday morning started early. Connor showed up at 8 a.m. sharp with his truck and 2 guys I recognized from other jobs. I'd already spent Saturday night boxing up all my personal belongings, so we were ready to move efficiently. First stop was the bank, where I walked in when they opened and had what was probably the most satisfying conversation of my adult life with the customer service representative. I removed Ashley as an authorized user on every single account: checking, savings, both credit cards. I took her off my car insurance and my phone plan. I even removed her access to the Netflix and Spotify accounts she'd been using. While I was at the bank handling all the financial stuff, Connor and his guys started loading the truck with my belongings. By noon, we had everything loaded up. The apartment went from looking like a comfortable home to looking like a very expensive empty shell in about 3 hours. Connor kept asking if I was sure about this approach. "You know she's going to lose her mind when she gets back, right?" he said. "That's the point," I replied. "And you're really not going to give her any warning about this?" She didn't give me any warning when she snuck out to go to the Caribbean with her ex-boyfriend. That shut him up pretty quickly. Sunday afternoon, I went back to the old apartment to handle the utilities situation. I called the electric company, gas company, and internet provider. Everything was in my name anyway, so canceling was surprisingly easy. The customer service representatives all asked the same question: if I wanted to transfer service to another tenant at the address. "Nope, just cancel everything," I told each of them. "Sir, this will leave the apartment without power or internet." "Are you sure? The other tenant doesn't want to take over the accounts?" "Not my problem," I replied each time. By 6 p.m., the apartment was going to be a very expensive empty box with no electricity, no gas, no internet, and no TV to distract from how quiet and depressing it had become. Exactly what Ashley deserved to come home to after her romantic getaway. The lease situation was particularly interesting from a strategic standpoint. Both our names were on the lease agreement, but I'd been paying 100% of the rent for the past 9 months since her hours got cut. Legally, we were both responsible for the financial obligations, but practically, I was the only one keeping us from getting evicted. I wasn't going to break the lease or try to get out of it early. That would have been too complicated and potentially expensive for me. Instead, I was just going to stop paying rent and let Ashley deal with the consequences. She wanted to make adult decisions without consulting me. She could handle adult responsibilities without my financial support. Sunday evening, I sat in my new apartment eating pizza and setting up my electronics. My phone was blowing up with notifications from Ashley's Instagram. More vacation photos, more shots of her and Derek looking like they were having the absolute time of their lives. I turned my phone face down and focused on getting my new place organized. For the first time in days, I actually felt calm. Not happy exactly, but like I was finally taking control of a situation that had been driving me completely insane. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Monday morning, I went back to the old apartment one final time. I left Ashley's engagement ring on the kitchen counter, along with a simple note: "Hope Nassau was worth it. Good luck with the rent. Tyler." Short and to the point. No anger, no long explanation, no emotional manipulation. Just the basic facts of the situation. The beauty of my plan was that Ashley wouldn't know anything was wrong until she actually got home. She'd spend her entire vacation thinking she was getting away with something, posting photos and having fun while I sat at home like some kind of chump. Meanwhile, her whole life was getting systematically dismantled without her having any idea what was happening. Monday afternoon, I had all my meeting preparation ready for Tuesday morning with the company's legal team. All the credit card statements were printed out and organized. Screenshots of her Instagram posts showing her at these expensive places during supposed business meetings. Even text messages where she'd lied to me about what the charges were actually for. The legal team had been very clear about what they needed for the police report: documentation of unauthorized use, proof that the charges weren't legitimate business expenses, and evidence that the authorized user had deliberately misrepresented the nature of the charges. I had all of that and more. Tomorrow was definitely going to be interesting. Tuesday morning, I walked into my company's legal department with everything meticulously organized. The legal team was completely professional and businesslike. They went through each fraudulent charge systematically. Every single charge had been processed as a business expense with fake client codes. I'd only authorized emergency use of the card, but she'd been systematically stealing for months and documenting it all on social media like a complete idiot. They explained that they were required to file a police report for fraud involving amounts over $1,000. "We'll have the warrant ready when she gets back on Tuesday," one of the lawyers told me. The evidence was absolutely rock solid. She'd basically built her own criminal case against herself with her social media posts. I left that meeting feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time since this whole mess started, I wasn't the one dealing with consequences for someone else's terrible decisions. Ashley had made her choices, and now she was going to face the actual results of those choices. The rest of the week was probably the most peaceful I'd felt in months. I focused completely on work, got settled into my new apartment, and started actually enjoying my life again without constant relationship drama weighing me down. Tuesday evening around 6:30 p.m., I was at home making dinner when my phone started going absolutely crazy. I'd had it turned off for most of the weekend because I didn't want to deal with whatever drama was inevitably coming my way. When I turned my phone back on for the first time in 2 days, I was hit with an avalanche of notifications, 52 missed calls, and over 70 text messages. The progression of messages was exactly what you'd expect from someone walking into a complete disaster. The first few texts were just confused questions. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? Something's wrong with the apartment. Then it escalated quickly to panic. The power's out, and the internet isn't working. Half our stuff is missing. What happened here? The final messages were just desperate. Please just call me back. I don't know what to do. I can't afford this place by myself. Lisa, Ashley's sister, had been texting me too. Ashley's having a complete breakdown. She says you moved out. What the hell happened? She's at my place crying and won't tell me what's going on. I called Lisa back around 8:30 p.m. She was completely freaking out about Ashley coming home to find the apartment empty and having what sounded like a total emotional breakdown for the past 2 hours. I explained calmly that we'd broken up and I'd moved out while she was on vacation. That's when things got really interesting. Lisa had absolutely no idea that Ashley had gone to the Bahamas with Derek. Apparently, Ashley had told her entire family that it was a work retreat. When I mentioned that her work retreat was actually a romantic getaway with her ex-boyfriend, Lisa went completely silent for a long moment. Wait, Derek? Her ex-Derek? She asked, sounding genuinely shocked. The very same, I confirmed. She called me controlling for not being comfortable with the trip, then left anyway. So I ended our engagement and moved out. Lisa admitted she had no idea about any of this. Ashley had been lying to everyone about what the trip really was. I told her that Ashley had actually called me controlling for having normal relationship boundaries, then decided to go playhouse with her ex in the Caribbean while we were supposed to be planning our wedding. I had no idea, Lisa said quietly. She told us it was some design conference thing. Around 10:30 p.m., while Ashley was still at Lisa's place trying to figure out what to do next, the police showed up at the apartment. The timing was absolutely perfect. She was there dealing with the empty apartment situation when they knocked on the door with an arrest warrant. Lisa called me at 11 p.m., completely freaking out. They arrested her, Tyler. Actually arrested her with handcuffs and everything. What did she do? I explained about the corporate credit card fraud, the $3,600 in unauthorized charges, how she'd been lying about business expenses for months while stealing from my employer. All those spa days, expensive dinners, and shopping trips while telling my company they were client meetings. She's been using your work credit card for personal stuff? Lisa asked, her voice getting higher. Spa days, expensive dinners, shopping trips, I confirmed. All while telling my company they were legitimate business meetings. She was basically stealing from my employer and documenting it on Instagram like an idiot. Lisa went quiet again. I thought you were paying for all that stuff. I thought I was too. Turns out she was just stealing it. The arrest made the local news the next day. Not because Ashley was some kind of celebrity, but because credit card fraud cases involving corporate accounts sometimes get picked up by business reporters, especially when the amounts are significant. Seeing her mugshot online was absolutely surreal. She made bail Wednesday morning, but the damage was completely done. Her job fired her immediately when they found out about the arrest. Something about maintaining client trust and company reputation. Derek apparently stopped returning her calls after the whole thing became public knowledge. Turns out his investment firm wasn't particularly thrilled about their rising star being associated with someone who'd just been arrested for fraud. The legal case took several months to completely wrap up, but Ashley eventually pleaded guilty to avoid jail time. She had to pay full restitution plus substantial fines, which basically destroyed her financially. Her credit was completely ruined. She couldn't find decent work with a fraud conviction on her record, and she ended up moving back in with her parents about 4 hours away. Meanwhile, my company actually gave me a promotion for handling the fraud situation professionally and protecting company assets. I'm doing better at work than I have in years, honestly. Turns out I'm way more productive when I'm not constantly stressed about relationship drama and someone else's poor decisions. Last I heard, Ashley was working at some call center and posting Instagram stories about toxic exes and learning to trust again. The irony was absolutely incredible. She was painting herself as the victim of some terrible relationship while conveniently leaving out the parts about corporate fraud and abandoning her fiancé for a vacation with her ex-boyfriend. Derek got engaged to someone else about 7 months after the Bahamas trip. Funny how that worked out. Apparently his just friends vacation buddy wasn't quite girlfriend material when it came to actually building a future with someone. I guess romantic getaways with other people's fiancés don't translate into long-term relationship potential. The crazy thing is, I don't even feel angry about any of this anymore. Looking back, 5 years felt like forever when I was living through it day by day. But now I can see all the red flags I'd been systematically ignoring. The way she'd consistently dismiss my concerns about various situations, make me feel paranoid for having completely normal expectations, prioritize literally everyone else's feelings over mine. She'd shown me exactly who she was as a person over and over again, and I'd finally developed the sense to actually believe her instead of making excuses for her behavior. My face when I realized I'd dodged the biggest bullet of my entire life. That feeling when you wake up one day and your manipulative fiancé is just gone, and suddenly everything about your relationship makes perfect sense. I've been single for about 8 months now, and I'm actually enjoying it for the first time in years. No one questioning my every boundary or making me feel crazy for having basic standards. No one stealing from my employer while simultaneously playing the victim. No one making me doubt my own sanity over fundamental relationship expectations. I'm dating again, but taking it extremely slow this time. I actually know what red flags look like now, and I absolutely will not ignore them again like I did for years with Ashley. Looking back, the whole experience was like a masterclass in how manipulation actually works in relationships. She'd spent years systematically conditioning me to doubt myself, making me think that normal relationship expectations were somehow controlling behavior. She'd been training me to back down whenever she wanted to do something sketchy or inappropriate. The Bahamas trip wasn't really the core problem. It was just the final test to see exactly how much disrespect I'd tolerate before I finally stood up for myself. And when I actually said no for once, she just did it anyway because she'd never actually respected me or our relationship in the first place. If your partner ever tries to gaslight you into thinking that basic boundaries are controlling behavior, run. Don't walk, run as fast as you can. If they're making you question your sanity over completely normal expectations, like not wanting them to go on romantic vacations with their ex-boyfriends, they're absolutely not the right person for you. If they consistently prioritize literally everyone else's feelings over yours, they're showing you exactly where you rank in their life. Believe them when they show you this, instead of making excuses for their behavior like I did for way too long. The engagement ring is still sitting in my desk drawer at home. Sometimes I look at it and remember how absolutely certain I was that we were going to make it as a couple, how I'd made endless excuses for every single red flag, telling myself she was just independent or going through a rough patch with work. Now I can see clearly that it was never about independence or temporary stress. It was about her doing whatever she wanted without any consideration for how it affected me or our relationship. That's not a life partner. That's a parasite who takes advantage of someone's love and generosity. The best decision I ever made was moving out completely while she was gone, instead of waiting around for some big dramatic conversation where she'd somehow managed to make me the villain again. Sometimes the most powerful response to blatant disrespect is just walking away without explanation and letting them figure out how much you were actually contributing when you're not there to clean up their messes anymore. Anyway, that's my story. 5 years with a manipulative person who committed fraud and chose her ex-boyfriend over me. And it ended up with her getting arrested while I got promoted. Sometimes karma works exactly like it should, and justice actually prevails. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the trash really does take itself out. You just have to stop preventing it from leaving.